Greetings, shalom, and blessings to you all in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Welcome to Un-Apologetics, the show that is unapologetic about apologetics, and I'm your host, CJ Cox. And just real quick, I would just like to say a brief prayer before we actually get started here on the show, and you are, of course, encouraged to join me. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for everything that you have provided us here, Lord. I want to thank you for all of the liberties and all of the luxuries that we have in this country, Lord. I want to thank you for your sacrifice and your mercy in delivering us salvation with the atonement of your blood through Jesus. I pray that you send your blessings onto everyone watching this video and that you guide me to only say your words and do your will. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen. Alrighty, so real quick again, I just do want to say, as I do with a lot of these, due to not having the videos or the services rather, for churches up, just recommend you guys to go down to gracenampa.org. Phenomenal preaching there, and I just want to greatly recommend that. It's just, in my opinion, the best, if you're not actually going to church, if you're listening to it online or something like that, it's the best services you can find. It's, again, my personal opinion, but, you know, what's the worst that could happen if you try and check it out. Again, that's gracenampa.org, gracenampa.org, and they are absolutely fantastic church services. Sorry. And also, I just want to briefly apologize here on this. Didn't end up getting this video posted. I'm actually recording it on Sunday, so I'm not going to be able to get it posted on Saturday when it's supposed to be getting posted. I'm going to have to get it posted on Sunday. So that is unfortunately something that is happening here, and I do apologize for that. It's been relatively hectic on my end. I do want to stress that this is not something that is going to be regular. This is mistakes on my end and not actually getting the show recorded, and these shows will be posted by Saturday evening, Sunday morning, and I also want to get a second show posted by Sunday evening, Monday morning. But nonetheless, what I want to get into here today is, as I explained to you guys last week, I want to get into specific prophecies and dedicate a show to specific prophecies. Last week we looked at Daniel 2 and how absolutely uncanny it is that Daniel was able to prophesy what he was able to prophesy in regards to kingdoms taking control of the known world, and how they would reign until how eventually that fourth kingdom would reign until the stone kingdom set up by God, made without hands, right? The mountain carved without hands. I can't remember how exactly it words it, but nonetheless, right? So, and then this one is actually going to be another prophecy here. In particular, excuse me. In particular, I want to be looking at the prophecy surrounding Ishmael from the book of Genesis. This is another one that is absolutely incredibly uncanny, and where the Bible was thoroughly completed by the time, rather, the Bible was thoroughly completed, this had not come to pass yet. So it is something that we can verify for a fact did come to pass, much like the Daniel 2 prophecy. There's multiple verses and even multiple chapters that we'll be looking into in Genesis, but it is all in Genesis, and they are specifically regarding Ishmael, the son of Abraham. For those of you who don't know, Ishmael was born of Sarai before she was Sarah, and Abram before he was Abraham. She was born of Sarai's handmaiden, rather, not Sarai, the Egyptian handmaiden Hagar, my apologies, and Abram. And he was actually the firstborn son of Abraham. And again, right, this is Abram. Actually, he hasn't been called Abraham yet. And the whole reason that he was having sex with Hagar in the first place is because Sarai said, there's no way I can conceive a child. If you go and lie with her, she's young, she's fertile, she'll be able to mother, you a child. And so Abraham did, and God actually rebuked him for this. He was 86 years old when this happened, but nonetheless, that is where Ishmael comes from. Now, Ishmael ends up growing up, and I think it's when Isaac is being weaned, so it would have to be when Isaac is still roughly an infant, but he's being weaned off of his mother's milk. He actually starts mocking Isaac, and this causes him to be banished from the camp that Abraham has, because Sarah at this point, she says that this person, this Ishmael, is not going to inherit the inheritance of my son Isaac, and like that, he ends up getting booted out. We'll actually be reading the entire story here from the Bible. That's just a brief overview. And there's a few different prophecies in regards to Ishmael due to that. Mainly, to give a brief overview, they talk about how Ishmael's descendants are going to be very powerful. They're going to be a great nation. They're going to be very numerous, and they're going to be very violent. And let's just get actually right into that, starting with Genesis 16 and reading out of the King James Version of the Bible. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had an handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abram, Behold, now the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarai said unto Abram, My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between me and thee. Excuse me. And so you can see here that Hagar's conception causes Hagar to not like Sarai at this point, right? More than likely due to some sort of jealousy, due to Sarai being Abram's first wife, and probably more beloved wife. Considering the whole reason he's with Hagar in the first place is simply to conceive a child, whereas with Sarai, he has been married to her pretty much his entire life. And Sarai said unto Abraham, I already read that, sorry. But Abraham said unto Sarai, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand, do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. And the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence comest thou? And whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself unto her hands. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for a multitude. So there's your first prophecy about Ishmael, is that his seed will be multiplied exceedingly. In this case, it's saying Hagar's seed, but he's talking about the child that Hagar's pregnant with, right? And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. So there you go. Prophecy number 2. Hand against every man, and every man's hand against him. Right? And the implication being here that since this is a prophecy about the seed being multiplied exceedingly, we're talking about the descendants. The implication is that the descendants of this man will also, like him, be wild men with their hand against every man and every man's hand against them as well. Right? And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. I assume that means that he will be dwelling amongst the different Semites, or possibly amongst the different descendants of Abraham because of Isaac. And also the Edomites are also descendants of Abraham, right, because of Esau. I'm not entirely sure. Just to be straight and honest, I don't really know. There are actually some versions of this that translate that very differently. They translate it to say that it is specifically to the east of Jerusalem. I don't think there's any evidence for that, and I think the King James Version is pretty solid with that, but nonetheless, that is interesting. I think it's the NLT version, if I'm not mistaken, that translates it like that. But anyways. And she called the name of the Lord that spake unto her, Thou God seest me. For she said, Have I also here looked after him that seeth me? Wherefore the well was called Ber Lahai Roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Marai. And Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his son's name, which Hagar bare, Ishmael. And Abraham was 86 years old when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abram. So there you have prophecy concerning Ishmael, saying that he's going to have a seed that is multiplied exceedingly. Man will not be able to count them. That is how exceedingly they will be multiplied. Now, of course, you can make the argument that once you hit 1 million, a single man couldn't be able to count them. Or once you even hit 1,000, a single man wouldn't be able to count them. But you get the implication, obviously. Even if you want to get super literal and technical, which the only reason I say that is because I have actually debated with atheists who have said that, or who have said that when he says his descendants will be more numerous than the stars, they take that literally, as in we can actually go out and count the stars, and we can actually go out and count Abraham's descendants, and they should be the same, which I don't believe that is what it is saying at all. I think much like this, excuse me, can't talk sometimes. Much like I don't believe that's what this is saying specifically. I think it's trying to just make the point that there's going to be a whole lot of people here, right? And these are going to be the descendants of Ishmael. So then you have that second prophecy stating that essentially they are going to be very violent. Ishmael himself is going to be very violent, and people are not going to like him, and they're going to retaliate violently against him, and likewise his descendants would be very violent, and the people are not going to like their violence, and they're going to, as a matter of fact, the way he specifically is described is a wild man, stubborn like a donkey. I don't think it doesn't say stubborn like a donkey. Let me go and read that again to say specific, just to show you specifically rather what it says. Multiply the seed. And he will be a wild man, his hand will be against every man's, and his man's hand, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Maybe it's somewhere else that I know comparison to a donkey somewhere else, and I guess I was just assuming I just read it, but we'll get there in a moment. Nonetheless, you see the very clear implication here, right? This isn't a vague prophecy that is stating that, there is someone from this general area that is going to, or some general, like with Nostradamus, for example. There's going to be someone who's going to rise out of Central Europe, which can be pretty much anywhere, and he's going to cause them to all go to war, right? And that can be interpreted to mean pretty much anyone. It can be interpreted to Bosnia-Herzegovina. It can be interpreted for the most common one that it has been interpreted for, which is Adolf Hitler, etc. Right? It could be even Archduke Franz Ferdinand. That is also Central Europe, and his assassination caused World War I, which also caused World War II. You know what I mean? That's a very vague prophecy. Here, though, you see very specifically saying, no, Ishmael, the child, or Hagar rather, the child that you are bearing, in particular, is going to have these descendants, and he's going to be a wild man, right? That's a very specific prophecy. Now, there are actually more prophecies here about Ishmael as well, going to Genesis 17, reading out of the King James Version, and we're actually going to start here on Genesis 17:15, just for the sake of time. Now, just so you guys are aware, Genesis 17:1-14 is God describing his covenant with Abraham. Starting at Genesis 17:15, and God said unto Abraham, As for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be, and I will bless her, and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. King of people shall be of her. Kings of people, rather, shall be of her. My apologies. Then Abraham fell upon his face and laughed, and said in his heart, Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, that is 90 years old, bear? And Abraham said unto God, O that Ishmael might live before thee. And God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. And he left off talking with them, and God went up from Abraham, and Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised their flesh of their foreskin, in the selfsame day, as God had said unto him. And Abraham was 90 years old and 9, when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And the selfsame day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son, and all the men of his house born in the house, and bought with money of the stranger, were circumcised with him. So there you see another prophecy that God is giving here. Right now we know his seed is going to be it's going to be multiplied exceedingly. It is going to be wild, and against every man with every man against it. Now we also have that it is going to be a great nation, right? Specifically, Ishmael himself will have 12 princes born of him, which we do see later on in the Bible. These 12 princes are born, and that there will be a great nation from him, right? And we see here, just go and read it again really quick. I have heard thee, behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. Once again, you're getting that he's going to be exceeded, all over the world, multiple people in his lineage. And I will make him a great, 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. So they're saying that Ishmael's descendants will be a great nation. Once again, a very specific prophecy in regards to Ishmael. Now, let me just go ahead and check here. There is one other point that I wanted to get at. Genesis 21, I believe it is. Let me see here. Yeah. So in Genesis 21, and I'm starting once again late in for the sake of time. So, starting with Genesis 21:7. Actually, we'll go with 21:6. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah would have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. And God said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of thy bondwoman. And all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Right, reaffirming again that this covenant is in fact through Isaac. And also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and took bread and a bottle of water, and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. And she went and sat down over against him a good way off, as it were a bowshot. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him, and lifted up her voice, and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called Hagar out of heaven, and said unto her, what aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with water, and gave the lad drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness, and became an archer. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. So right there you go. You see actually a few things. The first thing is, once again, reaffirming that his seed is going to be multiplied exceedingly, and that he is going to be a great nation. But also, you see the beginning of a conflict that has been going on now for thousands of years in the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Isaac. Now, this conflict is first stated when Hagar is, when she starts not, how's the way, try to remember how exactly the Bible puts it. But basically, Hagar starts despising Sarah after she conceives Ishmael, right? This continues to get worse to the point of where Ishmael, now 13 years old, 14 years old at this point, I think. Well, he would have been a little bit older than 14 years old because Isaac's being weaned, and now he's probably 15 or 16. He starts mocking the child when it's being weaned, right? And Abraham, not Ishmael, actually ends up listening to Sarah and kicking him out because Sarah is not happy with this. She's saying that Ishmael's not going to inherit any of the things that my son Isaac will be inheriting. And God says, well, she's exactly correct. Hearken unto her voice and send Ishmael out. Don't worry about Ishmael, because I have already made promises about Ishmael, and he will be a great nation with an exceeding seed. He will bear 12 princes, etc. Right? Now, what we see here is just a incredibly specific prophecy, and the reason I stress the specificity so often is because, it's very easy to say that somebody from the state of Idaho will rise and be great. It is very hard to say a descendant of Governor Butch Otter of the state of Idaho, direct descendant of him, and the descendants of him, right? Just to use a random example, not that there's anything special about Butch Otter, but will have a nation exceeding that is all their own. It's going to have just massive population. It's going to be a great nation. It's going to have its hand against every man, be constantly at war. Every man's hand will be against it. Seems very specific, right? It's something that's like, if that actually does come to pass as uncanny, that you would know that. Well, as we can see here, because did this come true? Well, actually, it most definitely did. Starting here, now we're going to go to different places as well, because I understand that a lot of people are not very fond of the source. However, first source we do have here is, in fact, Wikipedia. Okay. Origins. According to Arab, Islamic, and Jewish traditions, Ishmael was father of the Arabs, to be the ancestor of the Ishmaelites. Okay. So Ishmael is father of the Arabs. The Arabs are these descendants that God has promised all of this stuff to. Okay. The first written attestation of the ethnonym Arab occurs in the Assyrian inscription of 853 BC, where Shalmaneser III lists a king, Gindibu, of Matu Arabai, or Arab land, as among the people he defeated at the Battle of Kakar. This is 853 BC. This is the first reference we get to Arabs at all, ever, right? Other than, of course, the Bible, because 1458, well, 1458 according to my time frame, 1446 according to a lot of other people's time frame, but basically mid-1400s BC is when this prophecy would have been written down. It would have been given nearly 400 years before that to Abraham, but Moses is actually the one who wrote this down. And when he wrote this down, that is still 600 years before we actually ever see the Arabs mentioned, even though we see them clearly living there, because the Bible is talking about them all the time as living there. Which actually is rather interesting. There's quite a bit of people whose earliest records you find in the Bible, rather than in other places like Assyrian inscriptions and things like that. But anyways, if we continue on with here, some of the names given in these texts are Aramaic, while others are the first attestations of ancient North Arabian dialects. In fact, several different ethnonyms are found in Assyrian texts that are conventionally translated Arab. Arabai, Arabu, Aribi, Urbi, and Urbi, rather. Sorry, I read that incorrectly. Many of the Kedarite queens were also described as queens of the Aribi. The Hebrew Bible occasionally refers to Arabi peoples, or variants thereof, translated as Arab or Arabian. The scope of the term at that stage is unclear, but seems to have referred to various desert-dwelling Semitic tribes in the Syrian desert and Arabia. Arab tribes came into conflict with the Assyrians during the reign of the Assyrian king Assurbanipal, and he records military victories against the powerful Kedar tribe, among others. Right? So, just showing you there that you have the descendants here of Ishmael. being called Arabs, according to the Arab and, which is, their own personal history, and according to the Jewish texts as well. And the Jewish texts are also the earliest to talk about any of these peoples, so I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be believed, especially considering that's by roughly 600 years if the traditional dates are to be believed, which of course I believe they are. And for the record, let me just state that if this were not given to Abraham between 1800 and 1900, not written down in mid-1400 by Moses, and the secularist opinions are actually correct, and this wasn't written down until sometime between 300 and 500 BC, okay, that's perfectly fine, because there's problems with that we would get into in a separate show if this were a different topic, right? But specifically on the prophetic topic, that's perfectly fine, because the Arabs have still actually done nothing at that time that would constitute this prophecy being fulfilled. It actually takes quite a long time for this prophecy to be fulfilled. As if we look here on this same Wikipedia page at history rather than origins, pre-Islamic Arabia refers to the Arabian Peninsula before the rise of Islam in the 630s. The study of pre-Islamic pre-Islamic America. The study of pre-Islamic Arabia is important to Islamic studies as it provides the context for the development of Islam. Some of the settled communities in the Arabian Peninsula developed into distinctive civilizations. Sources for these civilizations are not extensive and are limited to archaeological evidence, accounts written outside of Arabia, and Arab oral traditions later recorded by Islamic scholars. Among the most prominent civilizations was Dilmun, which arose around the 4th millennium BC and lasted to 538 BC. And of course, just so you know, we would have issues with that as Christians due to the carbon dating and things like that. But that is not actually the point of this conversation. So I don't want you guys to think that I'm avoiding those topics, because in later shows we will be talking about things like, were there actually human civilizations in the 4th millennium BC? But that is not the topic of this particular discussion. We're talking about prophecy, so just so you guys are aware. And Thamud, which arose around the 1st millennium BC and lasted to about 300 CE. AD is the way that should be said. Why do you guys have to do that politically correct nonsense? I hate that. Anyways, additionally, from the beginning of the 1st millennium BC, southern Arabia was the home to a number of kingdoms, such as the Sabian kingdom, and the coastal areas of eastern Arabia were controlled by the Parthian and I do apologize, I can't talk sometimes. Sasanians from 300 BC. Okay. Now, there are obviously Arabs living here. Ishmael would go all the way back to sometime between 1800 and 1900 BC. So, of course, his descendants would have been living here for quite a long time. However, clearly none of these, Dilmun, Thamud, Sabian, are super powerful kingdoms that had anything we actually look to in, as great civilization, right? Not even as powerful as some of the weaker great civilizations like the Tibetans or the Kushites, economically, militarily, culturally, influentially. They're just not. For the most part, even, they're actually tribal and small kingdoms, and in this case it even says that some of them are controlled by Parthian and man, I cannot say that word. I'm not even going to try again. But you see the point, right? This is not a incredibly powerful group of people. If we go moving on here, talking about the classical kingdoms, it says Proto-Arabic or ancient North Arabian texts give a clearer picture of the Arabs' emergence. The earliest are written in variants of epigraphic Southern Arabian Musnad script, including the 8th century BC Hassian inscription of eastern Saudi Arabia, the 6th century BC Layhanti text of southeastern Saudi Arabia, and the Thamudic texts found throughout the Arabian Peninsula and Sinai, not in reality connected with Thamud, just in parentheses there for you. That is in parentheses here on the article, just so you know, I didn't actually add that. The Nabateans were nomadic. Sorry, I'm just mixing the words here. I do apologize for that. Starting over. The Nabateans were nomadic who moved into territory vacated by the Edomites, Semites who settled the region centuries before them. Their earliest inscriptions were in Aramaic, but gradually switched to Arabic, and since they had writing, it was they who made the first inscriptions in Arabic. The Nabatean alphabet was adopted by Arabs to the south and evolved into modern Arabic script around the 4th century. That would be AD. This is attested by Sephardic inscriptions beginning in the 1st century BC and the many Arabic personal names in Nabatean inscriptions. From about 2nd century BC, a few inscriptions from Qaryat al-Fa reveal a dialect no longer considered Proto-Arabic but pre-Classical Arabic. 5 Syriac inscriptions mentioning Arabs have been found at Sumatar, Harabesi, one of which dates to the 2nd century. So again, you're still not seeing any super powerful kingdoms coming out here, anywhere, right? And at this point now we're at 200. So not only is this Jewish text in Genesis definitely written, but the New Testament texts are definitely written by this point. The Bible's pretty much done, actually. As a matter of fact, the Bible is completely finished. The latest book written was the Book of Revelation, which would have been written sometime around 90. 2nd century BC is post-90. That, by definition, has to be post-100. So, we see here clearly that this prophecy has not come to pass by the time this Bible is completed. So if it does come to pass, it is clearly predictive prophecy and cannot be something that any of these scribes that Moses himself, right, would have actually known beforehand. And we can continue to actually go through there in this article until we, are blue in the face of just reading about pre-Islamic Arabia. But essentially, nothing comes of it, right? You also have one here. I'm actually going to be posting these links in the description, both to that Wikipedia article and to the other ones I get here. Another one here from the UCG.org, which is a religious, it's actually a church. What does UCG stand for? Well, at any rate, the article is called, I'll be posting it there, so we'll see it anyway. But the article is called The Biblical Origins of the Arab Peoples. Right, and if we go down here, it says the biblical origin of the Middle East conflict. Just a moment. Actually trying to, here it is, okay. We begin our search almost 4,000 years ago in the city of Ur, a thriving metropolis on the eastern curve of the Fertile Crescent. It was in this crescent-shaped strip, stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Egyptian Nile, that the first great civilizations appeared. It was in Ur that the Creator appeared to a man named Abram, who would become a central figure in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. God's relationship with Abram starts in Genesis 12, 1-3. Now the Lord had said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation." Genesis 16 contains the fascinating but ultimately tragic story of Abram and Sarai's attempt to bring about God's promise through human means. Since it was physically impossible for Sarai to bear children, she gave an Egyptian servant girl to Abram as a surrogate mother. The child of this union was named Ishmael, and for 13 years Ishmael was probably told that he was the son of promise, the recipient of God's promises to Abram. God appeared again to Abram, as we read in Genesis 17, 1-2. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, "I am Almighty God, walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly." God made an amazing promise to Abraham. His descendants would be a special people for God's purposes for generations. God previously told Abraham that in him all the nations of the earth would be blessed. The promise also included the land of Canaan. Canaan is the geographically diverse strip of land running along the eastern Mediterranean Sea that is the center of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict today. God reestablished his covenant with Abraham, but there was another stipulation that would come as a shock to the man to whom God had promised so much. Then God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai your wife, I will bless her and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. King of peoples shall be from her." Genesis 17, 15-16. God's statement seemed incredible. Not only had Sarah been barren her whole life, but she was now well past normal childbearing age. What God was promising could only happen through divine intervention. Besides, Abraham already had a son, whom he loved dearly. In Genesis 17:18, Abraham says to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." Abraham believed for many years that Ishmael was the son of promise, but God informed him that the sovereign Lord of history had other plans. It was always God's plan for the son of promise to come from Abraham and Sarah. The use of Hagar as a surrogate was of their devising, not God's. What an important lesson. How many times do we proceed with our own ideas of God's will, while in reality, He has totally different plans? Abraham and Sarah tried to fulfill God's promise by human means on a human timetable. What happened next shaped the history of many generations. God promised a son to Abraham through his wife Sarah, but what about Ishmael? Abraham asked God if Ishmael would be the son of God's promise. God's answer is recorded in Genesis 17:19-20. Then God said, "No, Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation." As God promised, Sarah became pregnant and gave birth to Isaac. The hurt and anger of the teenage Ishmael toward this half-brother Isaac led Abraham to send him and his mother Hagar into the wilderness. The young man, told since childhood that he was the son of promise, found himself an outcast from his father. This set the stage for generations of strife between him and Abraham's other son Isaac. Ishmael went on to become the father of many Arab nations. So there you have another record here, just sort of showing, right, just because Wikipedia is secular and is not considered the best of sources, you just have another record here that is claiming that the Arab people are actually descendants of Ishmael. You can also go to the new encyclopedia.com, and that will make the same claim. Britannica will say that the Arabs make the same claim, etc., etc. We have basically our answer, though, right? The Arabs are Ishmaelites. So, the question then becomes, are the Arabs people who have had their hands against every nation? Are they people who are exceeding in their population? And are they a great nation? The answer is, of course, resounding yes. The first one here, and this prophecy doesn't start coming to pass until about 622. And in the 622, you actually see the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, well, technically there's actually no vowels in Arabic, so it could be Mohammed or Muhammad, but Muhammad is the way that I usually hear Arabs pronouncing it. But nonetheless, as we see here in this book, I'll actually be pulling up some, just to get you some brief text about actually the military exploits of Muhammad. What we can say about him being a prophet is, a different discussion in and of itself, but we can definitely all agree that he was a military genius and that he conquered the entire Arabian Peninsula in a matter of 10 years. So just reading here a little bit for you, okay? The Battle of Badr boosted Muhammad's position in Medina and allowed him to move against his local opponents. The first to find themselves in the firing line were Medina's 3 Jewish tribes. The town had originally been established by Jewish refugees fleeing Roman persecution and their local Arab proselytes, whose refusal to acknowledge the validity of Muhammad's revelations weakened the appeal of the Nascent faith, and whose affluence made them a natural target for plunder. Using a trivial incident as a pretext, he expelled the weakest of these tribes, the Kanuka, from the town and divided his properties among the Majakuran. Muhammad had originally meant to kill the Kanuka men, but was dissuaded from doing so by the local sheikh. In March 625, after a Muslim defeat in the Battle of Mount Uhud near Medina had dented Muhammad's prestige in their eyes of the neighboring Boydan tribes, it was the turn of the second tribe, the Nadir, to pay the price of the Prophet's setback. After a few weeks' siege, they were driven from the city and their lands were taken over by the Muslims. The last and most powerful Jewish tribe, the Qurayza, suffered more profusely following the abortive Meccan siege of Medina in the spring of 627. Charged with collaboration with the enemy, the tribe's 600 to 800 men were brought in a small group to trenches dug the previous day, made to sit on the edge and then beheaded one by one and their bodies thrown in. Women and children were sold into slavery. That the money they fetched together with the proceeds from the tribe's possession was divided amongst the Muslims. By now, Muhammad had consolidated his power to a considerable extent. The Uhud defeat, where over 70 Muslims were killed, including some of Muhammad's oldest and most trusted followers and his formidable uncle Hamza, was a humbling experience for the Prophet. Yet the Meccans failed to achieve their strategic goal of destroying the Ummah and were increasingly forced to rely on a network of alliances with Bedouin tribes in their fight against the Muslims. Muhammad, however, was not to be easily overcome. He managed to maintain the loyalty of the tribes around Medina, conducted a string of successful raids throughout the peninsula, and even resorted to the assassination of political rivals. These efforts did not prevent the Meccans from forming a grand alliance against Muhammad, yet they kept many potential participants out of this grouping, thus ensuring a more equal branch of forces in the final encounter. This came at the end of March 627, when a 10,000-strong Meccan Bedouin force advanced northward and laid siege to Medina, only to be confronted with a number of tactical surprises. To begin with, the Muslims had dug a trench around the city wherever it lay open to cavalry attack, a defense method hitherto unknown in Arabia. This caused considerable operational confusion amongst the Meccans, whose hopes of victory largely rested on their superior cavalry. This was further compounded by Muhammad's negotiations with the main Bedouin group in the coalition, the Ghatafan, aimed at bribing them out of the war. While the talks came to naught, since the Medinese considered such a deal to be beneath their dignity, the Ghatafans had been sufficiently compromised in the eyes of their Meccan allies to preclude a cohesive military effort. After 2 weeks of abortive attempts to break the resistance of the far more committed and disciplined Muslims, the coalition disintegrated and its members went their separate ways. Skipping ahead of some political stuff here. When in 629 Muhammad performed the deferred little pilgrimage, it made a great impression. A fresh influx of converts flocked to the Prophet's camp, and Muhammad took immediate advantage of the opportunity, using the killing of a Muslim by a Meccan in the course of a private dispute as a pretext for reneging of the Hudaybiyah agreement on January 1st, 630. He set out from Medina at the head of a formidable force. 10 days later, without offering any serious resistance, Mecca surrendered. The capture of Mecca was the ultimate prize for Muhammad. Less than 8 years after his undignified departure, the ridiculed and despised preacher had returned as the city's undisputed master and Arabia's most powerful leader. In the course of the following year, a steady stream of tribal dignitaries from all the corners of the peninsula would flock to the warrior prophet to profess their subservience. For many of them, this was a pragmatic response to the newly established balance of power, yet a true conversion to Islam, rather. Yet being the astute politician and statesman that he was, Muhammad was prepared initially to content himself with a merely verbal profession of faith and payment of tribute. Paganism as a social and political phenomenon was virtually a spent force, so there was no need to bring about an instantaneous transformation of the independent-minded tribes. As long as they gave him their political obedience and financial tribute, he could afford to wait and allow the socio-economic dynamics which now favored Islam to run their natural course. Even in Mecca, Muhammad refrained from following up his victory with mass conversions, leaving the population very much to its own devices and incorporating many of the local leaders into his administration. Some of them were given handsome rewards, including his arch-enemy and the town's grand old man, Abu Sufyan ibn Harb, and his 2 sons, Yazid and Muawiyah, the future founder of the Umayyad dynasty. Now, we get into the stuff about empire. But already, you see, as has been shown here, that in his military campaigns, Muhammad has come around and he has actually united all of these Arab people, which is the first thing that is needed in order for these prophecies to be correct. The Arabs cannot be tribes that are broken amongst each other. They have to be a nation, right? We actually see this in the tribes of Israel, right? The tribes of Israel, there's Danites and Gadites and Judahites and Benjamites and etc., right? And they seem to act very tribalistically and broken and in a confederal form in the period of the Judges before eventually being established as a solid nation. And during that time, when being established as a solid nation, is when they have, an empire stretching all the way from the Nile to the Euphrates, and when they have this incredibly powerful king in David, followed by another incredibly powerful king in Solomon, tons of people giving them tribute, respect even from the Egyptian pharaohs, right? Likewise, these Arabians can't be broken and fractured and confederal if they want to be a great nation as God has promised them, right? So, we see here in the life of Muhammad, he actually takes and does so not by appealing to a tribal conquest, but by appealing to a religious conquest, which of course we tend to see that quite often, right? When these prophecies come to pass, it always tends to be something religious, right? The splitting of Rome is on religious grounds. At least the remaining split is on religious grounds. And likewise, the Arab nations rising is due to religion. Nonetheless, we see that he is uniting all of the different Arabian peoples into one Arabian nation all over the Arabian Peninsula, right? So that there is just one set rule, and he is, while he is at some instances against the more vocal and more powerful tribes that oppose him, committing some mass slaughters in the name of military victory, and of course in the name of Allah, he also with other ones is deciding, well, Islam is at this point just going to be the dominant socio-economic and socio-political culture in this peninsula, so I can afford to wait, right? But still, we don't see the prophecy completely successful yet. We see that Muhammad has established a firm nation and made the Arabian Peninsula a firm territory, but that is not the full, what is the word I'm looking for here? I do apologize, I am totally drawing a blank here. That's not the prophecy coming to pass in full is what I'm trying to say. But anyways, moving on. As we have seen, the formation of the Ummah created a sharp dichotomy between Muslims and infidels, and presupposed a permanent state of war that would only end with the establishment of a global political order in which all humankind would live under Muslim rule as either believers or subject communities. In order to achieve this goal, it is incumbent, sorry, I am just reading terribly right now. In order to achieve this goal, it is incumbent on all free male adult Muslims to carry out an uncompromising struggle in the path of Allah, that is jihad. As the 14th century historian and philosopher Abdul Rahman ibn Khaldun wrote, in the Muslim community, the jihad is a religious duty because of the universalism of the Islamic mission and the obligation to convert everybody to Islam, either by persuasion or by force. Muhammad devised the concept of jihad shortly after his migration to Medina as a means of enticing his local followers to raid Meccan caravans, and he developed and amplified this concept with the expansion of his political ambitions until it became a rallying call for world domination. The Quranic revelations during this period abound with verses extolling the virtues of jihad, as do the countless sayings and traditions, known as hadiths, attributed to the Prophet. Those who participate in this holy pursuit are to be generously rewarded both in this life and in the afterworld, where they will reside in shaded and evergreen gardens, indulged by pure and virtuous women. Accordingly, those killed while waging jihad should not be mourned. Allah has brought from the believers their soul and their possessions against the gift of paradise. They fight in the path of Allah, they kill and are killed, so rejoice in the bargain you have made with him. That is the mighty triumph. And so we do see here, and I'm not going to read the rest of this because it's just talking about some of his military exploits and things like that. But we see here that on top of uniting these people, Muhammad actually sets in jihad the path that will lead to the rest of this prophecy coming to pass, right? And we move on here to another article briefly about the Rashida from, by the way, in case you guys were wondering, the source here, The Art of War, edited by Andrew Roberts, Great Commanders of the Ancient World and Medieval World, the Ancient and Medieval World, rather, 1500 BC to 1600 AD. The writer of the Muhammad article that we were reading there in particular, what was it? Come on. Can't believe I lost that. Just a second. Was Ephraim Karsh. Okay. So, there you go. Anyways. So now we see them as a nation. That is the prophecy becoming partially true because there's one set nation, but they were not exactly a great nation by the time Muhammad dies in 632. So we move on to a new period of Arabic life, the Rashidun Caliphate, right? And this is Britannica.com. The Rashidun, or rightly guided, which is what that word means in Arabic, are the first four caliphs of the Islamic community, known in Muslim history as the Orthodox or Patriarchal Caliphs. Abu Bakr, who reigned from 632 to 634, Umar, who ruled 634 to 644, Uthman, who ruled 644 to 656, and Ali, who reigned 656 to 661. The 29-year rule of the Rashidun was Islam's first experience without the leadership of the Prophet Muhammad. His example, however, in both private and public life came to be regarded as the norm, or sunnah, for his successors, and a large and influential body of Ansar, or companions of the Prophet, kept close watch on the caliphs to ensure their strict adherence to divine revelation, the Quran, and the Sunnah. The Rashidun thus assumed all of Muhammad's duties except the prophetic. As imams, they led the congregation in prayer at the mosque. As Khatibs, they delivered the Friday sermons, and as Umari al-Mu'minin, the commanders of the faithful, they commanded the army. The Caliphate of the Rashidun, in which virtually all actions had religious import, began with the Wars of the Rida, or apostasy, from 632 to 633, tribal uprisings in Arabia, and ended with the First Muslim Civil War, or the Fitna, from 656 to 661. It affected the expansion of the Islamic State beyond Arabia into Iraq, Syria, Palestine, Egypt, Iran, and Armenia, and with it, the development of the elite class of Arab soldiers. The Rashidun was also responsible for the adoption of the Islamic calendar, dating from Muhammad's immigration, or hijrah, from Mecca to Medina, in 622, and the establishment of an authoritative reading of the Quran, which strengthened the Muslim community and encouraged religious scholarship. It was also a controversy over Ali's succession that split Islam into two sects, the Sunnite traditionalist, otherwise known as Sunni, and the Shiite, or Shia, known as Party of Ali, which have survived to modern times. The religious and very traditionalist structures of the Rashidun were somewhat relaxed as Muhammad's contemporaries, especially the Ansar, began to die off, and the conquered territories became too vast to rule along theocratic lines. Thus, the Umayyads, who we will get into in a moment, who followed the Rashidun as caliphs, were able to secularize the operations of the state. Now, in case you guys are unaware of all the territories that I just mentioned that were the territories under the Rashidun Caliphate, there it is, right? Can you see that there? So you see from past Iran, just past modern-day Iran, all the way down to almost modern, what was once Carthage, right? Pretty much all of Egypt is under their power at that point. The entire Arabian Peninsula, of course, because Muhammad conquered that before he died. The entire Levant, all the way up to Armenia and Turkey, all of northern Libya. The Rashidun Caliphate has spread this empire very far. Now we can say the second part of this prophecy has been laid true, right? This is now a great nation. It's not just a nation, it is a great nation. And it is a nation that actually, believe it or not, gets even greater. Umayyad Caliphate, right here. This is what we are going to be looking for next. And this caliphate is the pinnacle of Arab rule, right? This is once again Britannica.com. Umayyad dynasty, also spelled Umayyad, was the first great Muslim dynasty to rule the empire of the Caliphate, and it ruled from 661 to 750, sometimes referred to as the Arab Kingdom, reflecting traditional Muslim disapproval of the secular nature of the Umayyad state. Right? So this is more of an Arab empire than a Muslim empire. The Umayyads, headed by Abu Sufyan, were a largely merchant family of the Qurayshi tribe, which is actually the same tribe that Muhammad came from, centered at Mecca. They had initially resisted Islam, not converting until 627, but secretly became prominent administrators under Muhammad and his immediate successors. In the First Muslim Civil War, or Fitna, from 656 to 661, the struggle for the caliphate following the murder of Uthman ibn Affan, the third caliph, who reigned from 644 to 656, Abu Sufyan's son, Muawiyah, then governor of Syria, emerged victorious over Ali. Muhammad's son-in-law and fourth caliph, Muawiyah, then established himself as the first Umayyad Caliphate. Umayyad rule was divided between two branches of the family. The Sufyanids, reigning from 661 to 684, descendants of Abu Sufyan, and the Marwanids, reigning from 684 to 650, Marwan I ibn al-Hakam and his successors. The Sufyanids, notably Muawiyah I, reigned from 661 to 680, centralized caliphal authority in Damascus. The Syrian army became the basis of Umayyad strength, enabling the creation of a united empire through greater control of the conquered provinces and Arab tribal rivalries. Muslim rule expanded to Khorasan. Garrison cities were founded at Merv and Sistan as bases for expeditions into Central Asia and northwestern India, and the invasion of northwestern Africa was begun. A new fleet conducted a series of campaigns against Constantinople, now Istanbul, from 669 to 678, which was ultimately unsuccessful, offset the secular image of the state because they were directed against the Christians. Though the Sufyanids generally retained the Byzantine and Persian administrative bureaucracies they inherited in the provinces, they were politically organized along Arab tribal lines, in which the Caliph was chosen by his peers to become, theoretically, first among equals and act on the advice of the Shura tribal council. Muawiyah, however, in securing during his lifetime an oath of allegiance to his son Yazid I, disregarded the traditional election, or bay'ah, and introduced the alien concept of hereditary succession. Civil war and the deaths of Yazid I in 683 and Muawiyah II in 684 brought Sufyanid rule to an end. Marwan I was proclaimed caliph in Syria in 684 amid tribal wars. Under Abd al-Malik, who reigned from 685 to 705, the Umayyad Caliphate continued to expand. Muslim armies invaded Mukran and Sindh in India, while in Central Asia, the Khorasanian garrisons conquered Bukhara, Samarkand, Khwarizm, Fergana, and Tashkent. In an extensive program of Arabization, Arabic became the official state language. The financial administration of the empire was reorganized, with Arabs replacing Persian and Greek officials, and a new Arabic coinage replaced the former imitations of Byzantine and Sasanian coins. I don't know why I can't say that. I do apologize for that. Communications improved with the introduction of a regular post service from Damascus to the provincial capitals, and architecture flourished. See, for example, Khan, Desert Palace, and Mihrab. Decline began with the disastrous defeat of the Syrian army by the Byzantine Emperor Leo III, the Isaurian, in 717. Then the fiscal reforms of the pious Umar II, reigned from 717 to 720, intended to mollify the increasingly disconnected Mawali, or non-Arab Muslims, by placing all Muslims on the same footing without respect of nationality, led to a financial crisis, with the recrudescence of feuds between the southern Kalb and northern Qais, seriously reducing military power. Hisham ibn Abd al-Malik, who reigned from 724 to 743, was able to stem the tide temporarily. As the empire reached the limits of expansion, the Muslim advance into France was decisively halted at Poitiers in 732, and Arab forces in Anatolia were destroyed in 740. Frontier defenses, manned by Syrian troops, were reorganized to meet the challenge of Turks in Central Asia and Berbers in North Africa. But in the years following Hisham's death, feuds between the Qais and the Kalb erupted into major revolts in Syria, Iraq, and Khorasan in 745 to 746, while the Mawali became involved with the Hashemiyah, a religio-political sect that denied the legitimacy of the Umayyad rule. In 749, the Hashemiyah, aided by the western provinces, proclaimed as Caliph Abu al-Abbas al-Safa, who thereby became the first of the Abbasid dynasty. The last Umayyad, Marwan II, reigned from 744 to 750, was defeated at the Battle of the Great Zab River in 750. Members of the Umayyad house were hunted down and killed, but one of the survivors, Abd al-Rahman, escaped and established himself as a Muslim ruler in Spain in 756, founding the dynasty of the Umayyads in Cordoba. Now, here we see a few things. First off, once again, for those of you who do not know, this empire was absolutely huge. I'm going to show you another image here. Okay, it stretched all the way from the same area that the Rashidun did, right, just barely past India. Sorry, I gotta get that closer to the screen. There we go. All the way down to Morocco and Spain, and you see it going up to Armenia. You see it having firm control over all of northern Africa. Obviously, the Levant, Persia, and Arabia are still under its control per usual, as is Lower Egypt, which actually, if you look on a globe, is the upper part of Egypt, but it's called Lower Egypt. So not just a great nation, but a very great nation. One of the largest empires ever. And it's actually not even done. We're not going to read about the Abbasids, but the Abbasids end up ruling until, I believe, sometime around the 1200s, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just actually briefly look into that Abbasid Caliphate. Yeah, the Abbasid Caliphate actually is still an Islamic empire and still a caliphate, and it rules all the way until 1258, until the Turks eventually come up in there and just kind of break all their stuff, right? But nonetheless, you see very, very clearly this prophecy. Sorry, just one moment. I gotta. Anyways, so you see very clearly, well after the canonization of Scripture, well after the writing of Scripture, the Ishmaelites, the self-admitted Ishmaelites, the, according to Jewish tradition, Ishmaelites, so the people who would have been talked about as descendants of Ishmael by the time that that was written, are very, very clearly a great nation. A huge nation. One, like I said, the Umayyad Caliphate is one of the most powerful nations in the entire, forget nations, most powerful empires in the entire world history. One of the largest in the entire world history. Got all the way up to Spain, led an invasion into India. Like, that is an absolutely huge swath of land. I think it's fourth in land empires, if I'm not mistaken. I may be mistaken. And if I am, please correct me in the comments below. But nonetheless, so what is your claim for that, secularists? Are you just going to say, oh, lucky guess that starting in 622 and stretching and continuously rising all the way up into the 740s, the Arabs did precisely what was said was going to happen in 1458 BC, 2,000 years beforehand, right? You just lucky guess on the part of Moses, right? Or I guess at this point it would actually be at the on the part of Abraham. Well, actually, even that is, the prophecy. This is actually a prophecy that comes directly from the lips of God. This isn't something that is actually spoken by a prophet. But nonetheless, we'll just say Moses, since Moses is the one who wrote the book of Genesis, and he would be the one who actually wrote it down. Just lucky guess by Moses. Is that the claim you're going to make? Okay, well then what about the claim that he's going to have his hands against every man? In what I read, you can just very clearly see that the Arabs were fighting the Persians, they were fighting each other, they were fighting the Egyptians, they then fought the Libyans, they fought the Syrians and Assyrians and Yazidis, they would fight the Afghans, they would fight the Indians, they would fight the Turks, they would fight the Spanish, they would fight the French, they would fight literally everyone around that time who would be surrounding them. Now, did they stop fighting everyone after their empires fell because the Abbasid Caliphate clearly does not exist anymore? Absolutely not. They have continuously been fighting since then, fighting Christians, right, in different holy wars. They have been fighting the Jews since 1948, since they first got there. They have been fighting the different Assyrians, right, massacring them, and massacring the Kurdish people, and massacring the Persian people, and massacring the Yazidi people. They have literally had their hands against every man, even to this day. We have groups like ISIS fighting pretty much the entire world. As a matter of fact, not pretty much, they are literally declaring war against the entire planet. Just another lucky guess. So 3 for 3, they become a nation. That nation becomes a great nation, spread in this absolutely massive empire, whose language is spoken in 50 some odd languages, whose faith is the second most adhered to faith in the entire world. Right? And on top of that, they are just as violent as the Bible says they are going to be. They're at war just as constantly as the Bible says they are going to be. And again, this doesn't start happening until 2,000 years after the traditional dates, and even 1,100 years, or 900 years at the minimum, 1,100 years at the maximum, according to the secular dates, which, of course, I still find to be wrong. But even if you are using those dates, this is still nearly 1,000 years in the future, or over 1,000 years in the future, depending on which secularist you're listening to. So what is that? That's 3 for 3 in lucky guesses? Well, let's go 4 for 4, because the last part of this prophecy explicitly states that the population of the Arabs is going to be huge. All right, it says they're going to be innumerable, actually. And if we go here, let's just see real quick. We'll actually get a few different sources here just to see, because obviously it's kind of hard to actually legitimately count people, especially in countries that are poor, which some Arab countries definitely are, not all of them. But according to Wikipedia, total population in a 2011 estimate of Arabs is 450 million people. This makes them the second most populous people on the entire planet, second only to the Han Chinese. According to the Arab League, it is 430 million people. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. There's another one I wanted to look at. Actually, I just can't find it here. Just a moment. Okay, according to ADC.org, there are over 300 million Arabs in the world. Okay, so we have over 300 million, we have 450 million, we have 430 million. If we just continue to look here, just to see if there's any other numbers. I'm not finding any different numbers. There are other people who have numbers here, but none of them seem any different than what we have here. But there you go. They're the second most populous ethnicity in the entire world. That means they are ahead of the different groups of Indian people in the Indian Peninsula, right? That means they are greater than the different Chinese people, with the exception of the Han Chinese, who's the one who's actually larger than them, then the French, then the Spanish, then the different Hispanic people from Latin America and South America, then the English-speaking people, which you have not only here in the United States and in England, but also spread out all across the world, in Australia, New Zealand, things like that. And it is these people who get the position of second. And actually, just for the record, let's see how much they are seconded by. Han Chinese. Okay, this is according to Wikipedia. There's 1.3 billion total Han Chinese people, so they're actually pretty highly outnumbered by the Han Chinese people, but that's kind of something that you would expect considering the absolutely massive population that they have there. But there you go. And for the record, the prophecy does not claim they're going to be the most populous nation on Earth. It claims they're going to be an incredibly numerous population, and they are the second most populated people on Earth. There's 22 different Arab countries at this time where there is an Arab majority population, where they speak Arabic. There's 50 different Muslim majority countries that follow the the Muslim religion, which is the religion of the Arab people. There are people who don't even speak Arabic who are reciting Arabic every day because of this, right? Clearly, this culture had its influence spread all across the entire world, religiously speaking, culturally speaking, linguistically speaking, militarily speaking, in actual physical descendants. So are you really prepared to claim, secularists, 4 for 4, that Moses just got lucky? He just happened to get lucky in saying that the Ishmaelites and the descendants of Ishmael would be this populous. He just happened to get lucky that the Ishmaelites would have their hand against every man, and every man would have their hand against them. He just happened to get lucky that this would be a great nation, right? That it would be this massive nation with this massive population. Just happened to get lucky. Sorry, I just can't buy that. To me, it is much, much more likely that this was revealed to Abraham and re-revealed to Moses verbatim so that he would write it down, and that there is a God out there who does definitely have the power to reveal to his prophets and his servants predictive prophecies. I don't think there's any way out of that. Again, if I picked someone very specific, Arnold Schwarzenegger, as an example, and said, you, Arnold Schwarzenegger, are going to have descendants that will be exceedingly multiplied, uncountable, right? They will form a great nation, and they will have their hands against every man, and every man will have their hands against them. Oh, and on top of that, by the way, just to throw something else in there, these descendants are going to be enemies of your other descendants. Now, while that's not explicitly stated, I will concede that. It's stated that the descendants would fight. I mean, it is explicitly stated that Hagar and Sarah don't like each other, which are the mothers, and that Ishmael does not like Isaac, and that there is a rivalry between Ishmael and Isaac over who is the promised son. And this actually continues to this day. The Muslim people and the Arab people, I say both because Muslim is the religion, of course, and Arab is actually the people, they still to this day claim Ishmael was actually the promised son, that the promised land belongs to them, right? They claim this mainly through their Muslim faith, and they also claim this through a nationalism, but nonetheless, you just see that this is something, this is to this day, 2017 AD, a absolute bare minimum of 2,300 years after the Bible was written, a maximum of 3,400 years after this, well, actually almost 3,500 years after this particular prophecy was written, and almost 3,900 years after this prophecy was originally given. Still, this is a debate that they have. Arabs believe that Ishmael was in fact the promised son. You see that rivalry that is discussed way back in the Waylens and guaranteed verbatim, without a doubt, established before this ever actually happened. Okay, because again, I can prove to you beyond any shadow of a doubt, even the most radically skeptical scholars, people who believe in things like the Christ myth theory, right, that it was all actually established by the Romans, things like the zeitgeist theory and things like that, right? At the bare minimum, they still have to concede a canonization of Scripture by 400. Okay, and that is again the most absolutely insanely radically skeptical people who claim any sort of actual scholarly knowledge. Okay, that is still 200 years before this happens, and that is again such a fringe theory as to not even be even remotely rational. The traditionalist, like I said, interpretation would be Irenaeus, who would canonize this, and would be 90. Irenaeus would be sometime around 150, and it would be 90 in Revelation, the last time that this was written, any books of the Bible, right? And it would be 1458 that this particular one was written. In my interpretation, 1446, according to some others, just basically run sometime around 1450. And it would be sometime around the 1800s BC, right? Just like these 1450s is BC, and all these other numbers I've been throwing out actually are BC. The numbers beforehand that I was talking about, 400, that is AD. And 90 is AD as well. As was the 150 of Irenaeus. Everything after that was BC, just so you know. I wasn't being specific with that, and I do apologize. But nonetheless, are you really prepared to say that this Moses just has that lucky of a guess, that he's just that good? Because if you are, then quite frankly, I don't think there's no convincing that kind of ignorance, is what I'm trying to say. And I mean that in the nicest and most loving of ways, because I'm not trying to be mean, right? I'm not trying to be dismissive of different opinions or anything like that. But if you can honestly look at that evidence, this is the exact same thing as the evidence from Daniel 2, right? If you can honestly look at the evidences provided here and say 100% convinced that this is just lucky guesses, that Daniel just had a lucky guess, that Moses just had a lucky guess, then, I mean, there's just no educating that level of stubbornness, in my opinion. But nonetheless, I am finished. So I hope you guys liked that. Again, there is going to be a book that I am going to be writing here. Hopefully I'll get it published. Hopefully, maybe I can even get self-published. You never know how this is all going to work out. But it is going to include everything on Daniel 2 here and everything we've been talking about Ishmael, and even more in detail since it'll be written. And also other different prophecies, like the prophecies of Isaiah, prophecies of Joel, prophecies of Hosea, and the other minor prophets, prophecies in the Gospels, etc. And we're actually going to continue on with this particular topic for a few more episodes. Next episode, I want to talk about here actually some of the prophecies of Isaiah. And we're going to discuss a few more prophecies and a few more other episodes here to just show the different aspects of this before I actually get this look finished if any of you guys are actually interested in that. Obviously, at this point, I'm more giving it out for free than anything else to get the name out because I only have 15 subscribers on YouTube. But, you never know. With the grace of God, maybe this is something that can actually start selling. And maybe not. It doesn't matter. Glory be to God either way. Let's go ahead and end with a prayer really quick. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for everything that you have provided with us again, Lord. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my thoughts and express what I believe to be absolutely 100% bona fide, concrete proof that you are the sovereign God above all, that you are the Most High, that you are creator of the universe and author of all things. I pray that you bless everyone who has heard this and everyone not, Lord. I pray that this be a blessing to those listening to it, and that it help them to seek you and to repent of their sins, Lord, and to want to be more like you and to accept your sacrifice. In Jesus Christ's name, Jesus Christ, holy and highest name above all names, I pray. Amen. Alrighty, thank you guys very much for watching here, and shalom. Like and share if you like our content here, and subscribe if the content has been pleasing to you. We certainly hope that this was a blessing to you, and again, we very much thank you for watching this. We'll have links to all of the articles quoted, as well as to the Bible chapters, and we will also have links to our Facebook page down in the description below. So again, thank you very much, and shalom. God bless all of you.